radar in Recoletos, who finished third in the Prix du Jockey Club, which was another Prix du Rhum race, resulting in a good time last time. And if Recoletos pitches up in the King Edward VII Stakes, I think he's got a decent chance.
Nice. Any thoughts on Friday? Final thoughts on Friday for you, Marcus?
Nope.
Let's turn the page to Saturday. We're going to start off talking about the Diamond Jubilee. It looks like we'll have some USA participation here, potentially in the form of long on value. Is he still in the betting and being considered after outrunning odds? What's the story with him?
Yeah, he's there. He galloped yesterday, and he's running for sure.
Really outran the odds last time at Maidan. There's no odd listed in the USAPP we're showing, but on the betting exchanges, he was trading at north of 100 to 1 and must have given his backers quite a thrill and then quite a disappointment there at the end. What do we think?
It's not shocking. It's not shocking that he ran that well to me. I mean, this is a horse that had not been sprinting that long, and a lot of the U.S. sprints, you know, over really fast ground at 5 or 5.5, that's just too sharp for him. He's not that kind of horse. A race run at a little more moderate pace and with a little more distance, like 6 furlongs, is really what he wants to do. Obviously, he handled the straight course. We don't know, you know, how he'll handle faster ground, straight course, but I think he's I see him at 33 right now for this race. That's higher than I expected, although I wouldn't have any confidence that he would actually be able to win.
Simon, what do you think about the Diamond Jubilee?
Well, I'm very interested to hear those positive remarks about long and value. I definitely don't think it should be as big a price as 33 to 1. Generally speaking, our sprinters in Britain and France are a little bit much of a muchness. Lamato is probably a little bit better than that, but he was very good at times last season when he won the July Cup. On other occasions, he wasn't quite so good. He also travelled across to America, where a mile might have been just beyond him. He bombed out in Dubai in March. They blamed the ground, although he has actually got form on ground with a bit of give in it. He should have his conditions, but I don't think he's streets ahead of the others. Horses like the Tin Man, who probably will come on for his reappearance, where he was beaten at York. Magical Memory ran in that race and was second, and similarly ran as if he might improve. But they're kind of, none of them are exceptional, and certainly on my figures, I wouldn't have long on value all that far behind them. I think he's got a realistic shot in what is probably going to be a pretty big field and a pretty open race.
When you're looking at sectional times for sprinters in the UK, Simon, is there any difference in evaluating horses, any clues you can get from the sectionals about horses running a straight sprint as opposed to running a bend, whether it's horses running a sprint bend in the USA or on a polytrack surface, for example?
Yeah, well, I've done sectional pars, bi-furlong pars, and where you don't have much in the way of data, and because very little has been produced in Britain other than manually, I make an adjustment of, I can't remember exactly what it is, of just over a length for each furlong on a normal bend, a sweeping bend of 2 or 3 furlongs, so it slows them down a bit.
Yeah, I asked trying to get a clue of which USA horses we can maybe project to run just as well, if not better, when the turn is taken out of the equation. But it sounds like it's a bit of an ongoing process to try to evaluate that.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I believe America has had sectionals of things like the Kentucky Derby going back into the 19th century. We're in the 21st century and still having to do a lot of the working ourselves, I'm afraid. That could be
It just blows my mind.
Yeah.
It seems impossible that could be the case.
Well, I think the prevalent racing being so much on the grass where the times, they're very meaningful, but it's not as straightforward because would you agree, Simon, it's less about final time and more about the relationship of the sectional times when you're trying to evaluate the overall quality of a turf race?
I would agree entirely. It's less about overall times, but that's exactly why knowing how overall times have been arrived at can tell you a lot about, not just about the horse's ability, but their stamina, the degree to which they may have been flattered by being well positioned or the opposite. And it does make it more complex because only about a third of races are truly run in Britain, according to time figures based on overall times. And you have to pick your way through the information and try and piece together exactly what happened. I would imagine an awful lot more are truly run, certainly on the dirt in America.
Explain that phrase. Explain that phrase for a second, Simon, and then I definitely want your thoughts on that, Marcus. But just for some of the more novice players listening, what does that mean, a truly run race?
A race in which once they get up to racing speed after, I don't know, 100 yards or so, basically there aren't large inputs of speed or slowing down. It's fairly consistent pace given the topography of the track. If it's uphill, obviously it'll have a slightly different effect than if it was on the flat. So truly run races tend to result in overall times that reflect the abilities of the horses. And individually, there could be horses who've done well to finish strongly off the pace or have done the opposite, but truly run races tend to result in reliable form. Not many, less than half of races in Britain by the standards that we apply are truly run. So they're tactical and they need a lot of interpretation of the bare results. But rather than putting me off, that actually encourages me because I think it's a fascinating exercise and it's one that a lot of people don't have the time or inclination to do.
Marcus, you wanted to follow up on that?
Oh no, I mean I don't remember what I was going to say. Well, I think it was just related to the fact that in my time doing this, I feel like it's gone a different direction here. There are fewer truly run races on grass at least than there were in the past. I just feel like the incidence of everyone, snatching up, taking a big hold, and going really slow during especially the middle portions of races without riders being aggressive. That's kind of become an epidemic, and it makes it hard for interpretation. And then in this country, a lot of people are so reliant on final time speed figures, and that's obviously impossible to make accurately if you're talking about a race that's not truly run, because no matter how fast horses finish, they're not going to be able to clock a good final time. And I think that makes it difficult for figure makers and people trying to interpret figures to get a true sense of how things are actually coming about.
The accepted technique with USA turf speed figures being to project a race that wasn't truly run, to put figures that make sense intellectually with what the horses usually run. In the UK, it's a little bit different. You do have a form figure, correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, that will attempt to do what those projected USA turf figures are doing, but you'll also have the opportunity, due to some of the pioneering work that you've done, to look at what's a little bit more equivalent to a raw speed figure, hopefully in the context of how slow they went early and how fast they went late.
Yeah, a lot of my work is based around taking overall times, which sometimes can be very illuminating, but just seeing to what degree the efficiency with which individual horses have run appear to have affected the final result, and upgrading the overall times of the horses as a result. It's difficult when you don't get many sectional times put on the plate, but I'm fortunate enough to be working in a profession where people occasionally pay me to look into these things and to not only take the data but to come to conclusions about it as well. And my enjoyment of horse racing is exploded really as a result of understanding or trying to understand the complexity behind why results happen and why sometimes times are a good indication of ability and sometimes they need to be viewed in the context of the tactics and the sectionals that have unfolded. I think every race has got a really interesting story if you can dig deeply into it.
I think that's well put. Let's continue on with our discussion of Saturday closing day at the Royal Meeting. Let's talk a little bit about the Hardwicke Stakes. A little tricky here, not knowing exactly who's going to turn up, but from this far out, Simon, who do you have your eye on?
Yeah, you're right. There, pretty much all the major contenders have got alternative engagements. We've spoken about Jack Hobbs, Highland Reel, and Ulysses in the Prince of Wales, Order of St George's in the Gold Cup as well that he won last year. At this stage, I've taken a punt on a filly called Journey,
sure,
who seems very likely to pitch up here, and she's not just making up the numbers either. She was only 5th to Highland Reel in the Coronation Cup at Epsom the other day, but she needed a run on her first 2 starts for previous seasons and really ran like she did on this occasion after an 8-month break. She'd run a really fast time when helping to force the pace and winning by 4 lengths at Ascot in the Champions Day Filly and Mares, which is on good to firm ground, and she's likely to get very similar conditions. On her day, she's up there with the Highland Reels of this world, I think, and this is a race that could possibly be weaker than anticipated at this stage. So I think Journey, trained by John Gosden, is definitely worth a look at a bit of a price. Shorter in the odds, Dartmouth is a very likely runner. He won this last year, but that was a pretty ordinary running, although Highland Reel was second. You may recall that Highland Reel's jockey lost his reins in the straight, and I think Highland Reel might well have won otherwise. Dartmouth has run already this year, won the Yorkshire Cup, but was rather workmanlike that day. I don't think Dartmouth is a horse to be frightened of. He's certainly likely to be there or thereabouts, but he's no superstar, and I'm hopeful the Journey will run one of her better races, certainly better than she did the other week, and I think there's a good reason to believe she will.
Marcus, do you have a view in the Hardwicke?
I can't add anything to Simon's expert analysis, although I will mention that Journey was a horse that I did notice last time as being probably, her last race was not truly representative, and she's a horse that's definitely capable of better. And I couldn't agree more about Dartmouth. He's to me, he's fully exposed for quite some time, and you know exactly pretty much, even at his best, what you're going to get, and there could well be something that steps up in front of him.
That's a great concept that I think you hear a lot more when English races are discussed than you hear here. The concept of exposed, meaning simply, we know how good that horse is. There aren't a lot of reasons to improve. Much more beneficial, generally speaking, to try to find a horse who's going to step up at a price as opposed to taking something exposed at the top of the market. Journey going out in those familiar Strawbridge colors will be easy to spot on the race course and a good idea from the team. Any other thoughts on Saturday's card before I get to a couple of quick questions from the audience? Gentlemen, anything else to mention for Saturday?